acting like this is your fault. She's not your responsibility.
It's just that things are different now.
Exactly, and if we're not careful, she's gonna find out what happened.
So we are talking about the movie Ava's Possessions. This one is written and directed by Georgian Galland. Now before I talk about this movie, I'm actually going to refer to another one that I recently reviewed, that one being Last Girl Standing. And in that film basically it dealt with what would happen to the survivor of a slasher. Basically, if you can imagine a slasher film where basically there's one female survivor, and that kind of tells you the story of what happens after she is the lone female survivor. And this film is actually very similar in the fact that this actually takes the place after a possession film almost. So basically we have a character called Ava, played by Louisa Krause. And basically she has been possessed, and the story basically takes place at the very tail end of that, and she has just kind of got, expelled the demons basically, and it's her dealing with the ramifications caused by this. Now this film is a little bit different in tone, in the fact that this is a kind of a very dark comedy, and it's a little bit more tongue-in-cheek than Last Girl Standing, which was more of a serious psychological drama. Although the plot here is a little ambitious, shall we say, and this is going to be one of my little drawbacks of this film. So like I said, the plot really focuses on Ava's character, as she has just had a demon expelled, and it's her basically dealing with her family and her friends and how they are accepting her and how they're kind of treating her a job, all things like that basically. Now this is obviously a very clear metaphor for kind of any type of clinics like AA and stuff like that basically, where you're having to kind of recuperate from alcoholism or drug abuse, things like that basically, or even any type of things like that really. This is kind of a metaphor for those type of kind of situations, and she's in a support group, so this is clearly a world where possessions are happening more frequently than in obviously in our own world, so much so that there's actually groups dedicated to kind of dealing with the aftermath of it. And there's all sorts of things that you maybe don't consider when you're watching a possession film. Obviously, the kind of the legal ramifications, for example, that is left from various damage and assault and things like that, to relationships with partners, to relationships with family members, friends. All of these have kind of been strained. And really it's this tale of Ava. She's trying to remember what happened and trying to piece together what she did when she was possessed, basically. And this kind of leads her down all sorts of unexpected paths. One of the kind of the main criticism I have of this film, we'll go over the negatives first of all, is that I actually think the plot is a little bit too ambitious, because there's so many kind of plot threads here. Basically, there's a kind of a murder mystery thread. There's the actual what has happened to her. There's kind of this kind of crazy friend called Hazel, who I have to say I quite liked, who is this kind of another kind of a woman who's been possessed, who actually quite likes the sensation of being possessed. There's all these different kind of spinning cogs basically that make up this film, and I just felt maybe, certainly in the second half of this film, it kind of gets a little bit convoluted in certain areas, and I feel like it would have either been suited to more of a TV show, or maybe to kind of drop some of these kind of these plot points and make it a little tighter. But I thoroughly enjoyed this film. That is going to be my one and only criticism of this film, because I actually really enjoyed this film. I thought this was a very original and well-made film, and was an engaging film as well. So let's talk about the main actress, Louisa Krause. Thought she was very good, very kind of a vulnerable but likeable kind of performance. And there's some very kind of dark humour. It is a possession film. There are kind of supernatural elements to it, but they're really kind of on the peripheral, really. They're kind of it's certainly not on the forefront here. It's difficult to really classify this movie, whether it's a kind of a comedy or a horror, so we're just going to call it a horror comedy. But I thought that it had a fun tone to it, basically. It doesn't take itself too seriously, but was a good and I think an adequate metaphor for all these kind of other ailments that you kind of might have, basically. So overall, I really enjoyed it. It's got some good supporting characters as well. It's good to see William Sadler back in a demonic film after obviously Demon Knight, and you'll notice a few other kind of familiar faces here and there. It's got a big supporting cast, actually. The direction here, all the lighting and stuff like the demonic effects are, if I'm honest, I have to pick another kind of little hole in this one. I think some of the demonic effects weren't as good as others. I think Ava's kind of demon looks quite cool, but there are a couple of other kind of things that you'll see which I don't think the makeup looks quite as good. It looks like makeup, but this film will leave you with more questions than answers. So if that's going to bug you, then that may be a problem as well, I suppose. But overall, this was an original film. I enjoyed it. It had a fun, if not somewhat convoluted plot, with interesting characters and an interesting world that you kind of want to see more of. Like I said, I actually think this maybe would have been better as a TV show, a limited series or something along the lines of that. But I would certainly worth checking out if you kind of like a bit more of an original take on a kind of like a horror comedy. It's not particularly gory. But overall, I would check out this film, definitely. I'm going to give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.